Thoughts on the readings for March 9th, Leviticus 16, Psalm 119 verses 1 to 40, 2 Corinthians 12:13. Leviticus 16 has often been described as what the law could not do. It deals with the Day of Atonement, or coverings of sin. The sacrifices under the law of Moses could never take away sin, nor could they cleanse the conscience of the offerer. The writer to the Hebrews particularly speaks of this in chapters 9 to 10 verses 9 verses 6 to 12, 23 to 28, and 10 verses 1-22 are an exposition on the Day of Atonement. Read these verses and ponder their meaning. Now for the breakdown of this chapter, which climaxes the section in Leviticus dealing with the laws of uncleanness. Verses 1 to 2. The entry into the most holy place was limited to the high priest on 1 day per year, and even only then under the strictest rules for preparation and approach. Verses 3 to 10 provide an outline of the entire ceremony. Verses 11 to 17 tell of the requirements of the high priest, whose entry into the most holy place was with the blood of sacrifice, Hebrews 9 verse 22. But also was the symbol of the live goat, symbolically resurrected, which bore away the sins of nation indeed for each individual. Isaiah spoke of this in chapter 53 verses 4 to 12. Verses 18 to 19 tell of the purification of the altar and the outer court. Verses 20 to 22 describe the sending away of the scapegoat, called in the Hebrew Yahweh's goat, for this goat spake of the bearing away of sins, cp. John 1 verse 29. Verses 23 to 26 tell of the changing of clothes by the high priest before entering the most holy place. Aaron put on a plain linen tunic, indicating the single requirement for drawing near to the Almighty was holiness. Our ability to draw near to our Father is because of the sinless offering of Himself by our Lord Jesus Christ. Verses 27 to 28 speak of the destruction of the body of the sin offering outside the camp, Hebrews 13 verse 10 to 16. Verses 29 to 31 tell of the need for devotion, and of the humbling of those seeking for the forgiveness, i.e. covering, of their sins. Verses 32 to 34 tell about the duties of the man selected to be the next high priest in relation to the disposal of the ashes. Psalm 119 is known as the longest chapter in the Bible, 176 verses. The psalm is principally about the mindset and behavior of the Messiah, our Lord Jesus Christ. The poem is a summary of what the 10 Commandments were trying to teach every Israelite, but in reality were only true in the lived-out life of the Christ. The Greek translation of the Old Testament, called the Septuagint, LXX, spoke of the commandments as the 10 words, Decalogue. The poem consists of 22 stanzas, each of 8 verses. Each verse in each stanza commences with the same letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Verses 1 to 8, for example, each start with Aleph, which in the Hebrew lettering looks like an ox. Verses 9 to 16 each start with Beth, the second of the alphabetical letters. Whereas Aleph tells of the faithful ox, Beth speaks of the house in which the ox serves. And so the story proceeds through each stanza. I can only give a brief overview here. For those wanting a more detailed explanation, please consult the Companion Bible by Bullinger. There are frequent marginal notes plus an appendix in the rear devoted entirely to this psalm. There are 10 Hebrew words used repeatedly throughout this psalm. They occur in every verse with the exception of one verse 122. The 10 translated English words stand out plainly due to their repetition when read. They are the words way, law, testimonies, ways, precepts, statutes, judgments, word, commandments, and paths. The reader is encouraged to search out the meaning of each of these words and then to read the psalm with greater understanding. Just a few verses for you to contemplate by way of meditation. Verses 9 to 11 and verses 33 to 35. Read these now aloud slowly and ponder their power in Messiah, and for your life. In 2 Corinthians 12 we are told about visions that the Apostle Paul had 14 years before the writing of his letter. The visions were so real that Paul was unsure as to whether he was actually there, or it was just a dreamlike revelation. The experience empowered him to deal with his severe trials, for which he earnestly beseeched God 3 times in prayer to remove. Each time he receives from the Father the same answer: "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." If only we could all learn that lesson. He speaks of his intent to see them, and this had twice been thwarted. What the apostle's thorn in the flesh was we do not exactly know. What we know is his eyesight was badly affected to the extent that Paul used a scribe to write his letters. His autograph at the end of each letter was in large handwritten characters, Galatians 6 verse 11. Additionally, Paul had sent Titus as his representative, as that brother closely knew the apostle's mind on the matters the epistle discusses. Titus also had a great love for the Corinthians. Chapter 13 concludes with final warnings and advice. The apostle had attempted visiting the Corinthian ecclesia twice, but his plans had been thwarted. Verses 5 to 10 is a call for all of the believers in this city to reconsider their motives and actions, and to change these if required, so that they might find a place in the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ at his coming. Verses 11 to 14 give Paul's final greetings and his appeal for the members of the ecclesia to live in love and harmony.